For more than 200 years, one name sat in more American gun cabinets than any other. Not Colt, not Winchester, not Smith & Wesson. Remington. A green and gold stamp pressed into blued steel, leaning against the wall of deer camps from Montana to Georgia. Bolt-action rifles passed from father to son. Pump shotguns bought at the local hardware store and carried through 40 seasons without a single malfunction. And if you asked a man in 1985 what rifle he trusted his life with, in the cold, in the rain, in the dark of a November morning when the shot had to count, there was a good chance he would say the same thing his father would have said, and his father before that. The Remington 700. That was the rifle, that was the name. Not because it was the cheapest, not because it was the fanciest, because it worked. Because it always worked. Because for 2 centuries, the company behind it had built its reputation on a single idea: that a gun with the name Remington stamped on the barrel would do exactly what it was supposed to do every single time, no matter what. The name is still stamped on steel today. The company that made it mean something is gone. This is the rise and fall of Remington, the oldest gunmaker in America that Wall Street destroyed. 1816, Ilion Gulch, New York. A 23-year-old blacksmith's son named Eliphalet Remington II is standing at his father's forge. He has decided he can make a better rifle barrel than any he can buy. A finished rifle in 1816 costs more than most families earn in a month. A barrel forged from scrap iron on your own anvil costs time and sweat and nothing else. Eliphalet heats a flat bar of iron, wraps it around a mandrel, and hammer welds it into a tube. He does this by hand, strike after strike, until the seams disappear. Then he walks 10 miles to a gunsmith in Utica named Riley Rogers, who reams and rifles the barrel on his equipment. Rogers mounts it into a flintlock stock. The gun is finished. Eliphalet enters a local shooting competition. He places second, but it is not the placing that matters, it is what happens after. The other shooters look at his rifle, they handle it, they ask where he bought it, he tells them he made it. Before Eliphalet Remington leaves that field, he has enough orders to start a business. For the next 12 years, he and his father forge rifle barrels out of the same stone shop in central New York. By the mid-1820s, demand outgrows the forge. In 1828, Eliphalet buys 100 acres of land along the Erie Canal in what is now Ilion, New York. Raw materials come in by barge, finished barrels ship out the same way. It will still be making guns on the same ground 196 years later. His 3 sons join him one by one. By 1856, the company is officially called E. Remington & Sons. Then the government comes calling. In 1846, the Mexican-American War breaks out. Remington gets its first military contract, 1,000 carbines for the Navy, and 5,000 rifles for the Army. Remington is no longer a barrel shop in a valley. Remington is a defense contractor. When the Civil War erupts in 1861, Washington turns to the private sector and Remington answers. During the 4 years of the war, E. Remington & Sons produces 250,000 rifles, carbines, and revolvers for the Union. At times, every man and boy in the town of Ilion works day and night for weeks to meet the deadlines. By the war's end, Remington has rivaled Colt as the largest arms producer in America. Eliphalet himself does not live to see it. He dies in August 1861, just months after Fort Sumter. His 3 sons take over. The company survives the founder's death without missing a shipment. But when the war ends, so do the contracts. Revenue collapses. The brothers try to diversify into sewing machines and agricultural equipment. In 1873, something nobody expects: typewriters. The Scholes and Glidden typewriter, the first commercially practical writing machine ever built, rolls off the Remington factory floor. The same workers who forge gun barrels now assemble key mechanisms. But the diversification is not enough. The sewing machine company burns down in 1874. Agricultural equipment slumps. By the mid-1880s, E. Remington & Sons is drowning in debt. In 1886, the company goes bankrupt. The Remington family loses control of the business they built with their bare hands. In 1888, a private investor named Marcellus Hartley buys the company out of receivership. He renames it the Remington Arms Company. He strips away everything except the guns. What remains is a gun factory on the banks of the Erie Canal. It is the only thing that has ever really worked. The 20th century is good to Remington. Very good. In 1906, the company releases the Model 11, a semi-automatic shotgun designed by John Moses Browning. Remington sells over 850,000 of them. Then World War I hits. More than 2 million rifles are produced at Ilion alone. In 1933, the chemical giant DuPont buys a 60% stake in Remington and modernizes the factory just in time for World War II. During the war, Remington supplies more than half of all small arms ammunition used by American and Allied forces. Then come the three guns that define the brand. In 1950, Remington releases the Model 870 pump-action shotgun. It becomes the best-selling shotgun in American history. More than 11 million will eventually be produced. Police departments carry it, soldiers carry it, duck hunters carry it, home defenders carry it. The 870 is not elegant, it is not expensive, it is the working man's shotgun, and it works. Model 870. In 1962, Remington releases the Model 700 bolt-action rifle. If the 870 is the everyman's shotgun, the 700 is the everyman's deer rifle. Accurate, reliable, smooth, affordable. The United States military adopts a variant as its primary sniper platform. Hunters buy it by the millions. More than 5 million were sold. It becomes the most popular bolt-action rifle in the world. Model 700. In 1963, Remington releases the Model 1100 semi-automatic shotgun. Three of the most successful firearms designs in history, produced simultaneously, in the same factory, in the same small town, where a blacksmith's son forged his first barrel in 1816. Think about what that means. A single factory, on the same ground, supplying guns to half the deer camps in rural America and half the sniper teams in the United States military. 200 years of continuous production. The same town, the same river, the same work. But inside the Model 700, inside the rifle that defined Remington's golden age, there is a secret, and the company has known about it since before the gun went on sale. Secret. In 1946, a Remington engineer named Merle Mike Walker designs the trigger mechanism for what will become the Model 700. The trigger uses a small floating component called a trigger connector. If it fails to fully reposition during the firing sequence, the rifle can fire without the trigger being pulled. Walker knows this. In 1946, he writes an internal memo warning of a theoretical unsafe condition. A 1947 inspection report calls the situation very dangerous. Walker proposes a fix, a small trigger block. The cost, according to a 1948 internal analysis, is 5.5 cents per gun. Remington rejects the fix. The rifle is already over budget. The Model 700 ships in 1962 with the floating connector. Over the next 6 decades, more than 5 million rifles leave the factory with the same mechanism, and the rifles start firing on their own. Not often, not predictably, a rifle might fire without a trigger pull once and then function perfectly for years. Remington uses that randomness as a shield. Every time a customer reports an accidental discharge, Remington blames the customer. Improper maintenance, user error, always user error. The company receives more than 10,000 written complaints. Dozens of people die. Hundreds are injured. Internal documents show Remington considers a recall at least twice, in 1979 and in 1994. Both times it decides against it. Cost, and fear that a recall would be seen as an admission of guilt. In 2000, a 9-year-old boy named Gus Barber is killed in Montana when a Model 700 discharges as his mother unloads it. Her finger is not on the trigger. In 2010, CNBC airs a documentary called Remington Under Fire. Mike Walker, now 98 years old, appears on camera and confirms that he proposed the fix in 1948 and that Remington rejected it because of cost. In 2014, under a class action settlement, Remington agrees to replace the triggers in 7.85 million rifles. It insists it is not a recall. Mike Walker dies in 2013 at the age of 101. The fix he proposed in 1948 takes 66 years to implement. It only happens because a court orders it. By the time the trigger settlement is announced, Remington is no longer Remington. In 2007, a private equity firm called Cerberus Capital Management buys Remington for $118 million, assuming $252 million in debt. Cerberus is not a gun company. It is a Wall Street firm named after the three-headed dog that guards the gates of hell. Its specialty is leveraged buyouts. Buy a company, load it with debt, cut costs, flip it. Cerberus creates a holding company called the Freedom Group. The name sounds patriotic. The strategy is not. It buys Bushmaster, Marlin, DPMS, Para-USA, Advanced Armament, Tapco, and Barnes Bullets. It rolls them all in with Remington. The plan is to build the largest firearms conglomerate in America, then sell it to the public through an initial public offering. Freedom Group files for one in 2009. It pulls the offering in 2011. The market is not interested. The exit strategy is gone. The debt is not. Inside the factories, things fall apart. Production targets go up, quality control goes down. The Model 870 Express starts jamming. The protective coating arrives uneven and is prone to rust. Gun owners start calling it rem rust. Marlin production moves to Ilion and the transition is botched. Lever-action rifles that had been hand-fitted for 140 years ship with misaligned sights and rough bores. Collectors call them Remlins. In 2014, the R51 pistol launches with so many malfunctions that Remington suspends production and issues a recall. A company that spent 2 centuries building a reputation for reliability is now known for rust, Remlins, and recalled pistols. On December 14, 2012, a gunman uses a Bushmaster rifle owned by Freedom Group to kill 20 children and 6 adults at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. The tragedy changes everything. Public pressure on Cerberus is immediate. The California State Teachers Retirement System, which holds a stake in Cerberus, threatens to divest. Cerberus announces it will sell its position. It never finds a buyer. In 2014, it rejects a $1 billion offer. 9 families of victims file a wrongful death lawsuit against Remington. The case will hang over the company like a shadow that never lifts. In 2018, Remington Outdoor Company files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Nearly $1 billion in debt. The filing happens on a Sunday night, one day after gun control marches sweep across the country. Creditors take over. The company emerges. It does not recover. On July 28, 2020, Remington files for Chapter 11 again. This time there is no restructuring. The company is broken apart and sold in pieces at auction. Vista Outdoor buys the brand name and the ammunition factory in Lonoc, Arkansas. A company called Round Hill Group buys the firearms business and creates Rem Arms. Marlin goes to Ruger. Bushmaster goes to a separate buyer. The empire Cerberus built out of American gun brands is dismantled in a bankruptcy court and scattered to the winds. In 2022, Remington settles the Sandy Hook lawsuit for $73 million. The company that pays the settlement no longer exists in any meaningful form. In March 2024, the Remington Arms factory in Ilion, New York closes. The building that Eliphalet Remington built on the banks of the Erie Canal in 1828, the building that produced rifles for the Civil War, 2 World Wars, Korea, Vietnam, and the War on Terror, the building that operated continuously for 196 years, goes dark. In 2026, a 250,000 square foot AI data center is planned for the site. The factory that made rifles for Abraham Lincoln's army will house servers. Somewhere in America tonight, in a gun safe or a rack above a fireplace, a man has a Remington 700 that his father bought in 1972. The bluing is worn at the muzzle from 50 years of use. The stock has a scratch from the time it fell out of a tree stand in 1986. The bolt cycles like it did the day it left the factory. Smooth? Sure. Certain. The rifle still shoots sub-minute groups at 100 yards. It will probably outshoot whatever replaces it. That rifle is the last piece of the company Eliphalet Remington built. Not the licensed name on a box at a sporting goods store, not the ammunition made in Arkansas by a company that bought the trademark at auction, not the data center planned for the ground where the factory stood. The old rifle in the old safe doing the old job exactly the way it was meant to. The forge that built it has been shut down, broken up, and sold. The trigger that made it famous carried a secret the company hid for 6 decades because fixing it would have cost 5.5 cents. The owners who bought it in 2007 loaded it with debt, stripped it for parts, and walked away when the math stopped working. The town that grew up around it is learning how to be something other than a gun town for the first time in 2 centuries. That is how you destroy a company that survived 200 years. You do not destroy it with competition. You do not destroy it with regulation. You hand it to a private equity firm that has never forged a barrel, never met a customer, and never walked the floor of a factory at 6 in the morning when the machines are warming up and the smell of steel and oil fills the air. You let them borrow against the name, cut the quality, and call it strategy. And when the debt comes due and the factory goes dark, they file the paperwork and move on to the next acquisition. Eliphalet Remington forged his first rifle barrel by hand in 1816. He entered a shooting match and placed second. He left with enough orders to build a company. That company armed the Union, supplied 2 world wars, put a rifle in every deer camp in America, and operated from the same piece of ground for nearly 2 centuries. It did not die of old age. It was killed by people who knew the price of everything it owned and the value of nothing it had built.